Okay, so we're looking at the Prelude. Stealing the Boat is an extract from Wordsworth's autobiographical epic poem. Okay, so this whole poem was never finished. Okay, it was published in 14 books, so it's huge. And this one comes from the first book, which is about his childhood. So if we have a look at the very beginning, and we have the word prelude. Does anybody know what prelude means? Any ideas? Yeah?
Wasn't it like the thing about cow?
Not quite. You're thinking promenade.
So like what came before?
Yes, it's the beginning. It means beginning, okay? And obviously this is about his childhood. The subtitle, Stealing the Boat there, that is quite simply what it's subtitled, so we know what we're talking about. Now, obviously, William Wordsworth, romantic poet. If you've ever read the poem The Daffodils at primary school, that's one of his most famous poems. He spent his whole childhood in Cumbria, okay? And he was fascinated by nature, and that's where this poem is set. So we have the whole poem, and if I just lift them up quickly, you'll see that it's quite long, okay? The structure is very, very loose, but what we do have is we have a very specific narrative structure, and what we have here is almost like a narrative poem. So any rhyme we come across is incidental. It's not there for any other reason other than he liked the words, and well, it's probably there for some other reason, but it's not there to create a structural plan. So we start at the very beginning. If I read the whole poem, and then we're going to go back through it afterwards. One summer evening, led by her, I found a little boat tied to a willow tree within a rocky cove, its usual home. Straight I unloosed her chain, and stepping in, pushed from the shore. It was an act of stealth and troubled pleasure, nor without the voice of mountain echoes did my boat move on, leaving behind her still, on either side, small circles glittering idly in the moon, until they melted all into one track of sparkling light. But now, like one who rows, proud of his skill to reach a chosen point with an unswerving line, I fixed my view upon the summit of a craggy ridge, the horizon's utmost boundary. Far above was nothing but the stars and the grey sky. She was an elfin pinnace. Lustily I dipped my oars into the silent lake, and, as I rose upon the stroke, my boat went heaving through the water like a swan. When, from behind that craggy steep till then the horizon's bound, a huge peak, black and huge, as if with voluntary power, instinct, upreared its head, I struck and struck again, and growing still in stature, the grim shape towered up between me and the stars, and still, for it so seemed, with purpose of its own, a measured motion like a living thing strode after me. With trembling oars I turned, and through the silent water stole my way back to the covert of the willow tree. There in her mooring place I left my bark, and through the meadows homeward went, in grave and serious mood. But after I had seen that spectacle, for many days my brain worked with a dim and undetermined sense of unknown modes of being. Oh, my thoughts there hung a darkness, call it solitude or blank desertion. No familiar shapes remained, no pleasant images of trees, of sea or sky, no colours of green fields, but huge and mighty forms that do not live like living men, move slowly through the mind by day, and were a trouble to my dreams. Okay. So going back to the beginning again, the first thing that you should have noticed when looking at the structure there is that it is full of enjambment and caesura, okay? It's always written as if it's being spoken. It's not like a sonnet, for example, where the line endings are very, very specific. It's quite free, which is why it's often referred to as free verse. We know that this is a section from an epic poem, okay? Epic meaning quite literally huge. So if we look at the very beginning, one summer evening, led by her, I found a little boat tied to a willow tree within a rocky cove, its usual home. So looking at that very first thing, there's a couple of things we need to look at. First of all, led by her. Who do we reckon her could be? Good, Mother Nature. Okay, so we're starting very quickly with this idea of nature being personified. There's another thing it could possibly be. Boats are often personified as women. Okay, so this could also be the poet talking about the idea that the boat has had some form of magical kind of power over him. And that idea of, it could be the boat, again personified as a woman, but that idea of fate. He's meant to be there. He's meant to learn this lesson. I found a little boat tied to a willow tree within a rocky cove, its usual home. Straight I unloosed her chain, and there we go, the boat being personified again. Okay, it's one of the reasons it could possibly be the boat rather than Mother Nature. Okay. Okay, and stepping in, pushed from the shore. So that first section there, just those first few lines, that is where he steals the boat. Sorry, my hand in the way. From that point onward, he's no longer taking the boat. He's already taken it. It was an act of stealth, and stepping in, pushed from the shore. It was an act of stealth and troubled pleasure. Okay, so first of all, he's doing something bad. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you're old enough to be able to go out at night time and pick up a boat, you know it's wrong. Which is why we have this stealth and the idea of troubled pleasure. What sort of device is troubled pleasure, anyone? Good. We have this oxymoron. And that kind of captures this idea of this childhood idea of doing something bad being fun. Yeah? He's happy about it, but he's worried about getting caught. Because that's a very childish sort of view to take, isn't it? That idea of, yes, I've stolen the sweeties. Woohoo, I've got the sweeties, but what if somebody catches me? Yeah? So, it was an act of stealth and troubled pleasure, nor without the voice of mountain echoes did my boat move on, leaving behind her still on either side, small circles glittering idly in the moon. So, the mountain echo. So despite the fact that he's stealthy, he's still making noise. Which probably adds to that nervousness about getting caught. Okay. Did my boat move on, leaving behind her? So it's interesting how the boat has now become his boat, my boat. He's taken ownership. It's almost like because he had the guts to steal the boat, it now belongs to him. And he refers to it as my quite the way along the way through. There's a lot of first person in here. I found it. My boat. Okay. Leaving behind her still on either side, small circles, glittering idly in the moon. How does that image sound? What does it make it sound like? Magical, good. And that is one of the key themes within the romantic idea, okay? We have this magical, almost peaceful kind of image of nature. And we've got this idly, glittering idly. What does idly mean? Yeah. So it's personifying the lake again. Do you know what's actually happening? As he's putting the oars in, the ripples are glittering in the moonlight. Okay, so we've got this personification of this glittering. It's this idea of the fact, first of all, it makes it sound like it's really expensive, doesn't it? It sounds quite luxurious because it sounds like it's almost like diamonds. So it's beautiful, but it's lazy. So the personification here. Nature is lazy. Nature has no timeline. Nature is without worry, which works quite nicely with that troubled pleasure. He's nervous about being caught. Nature, the lake, the boat, they have no feelings of being caught because they're not worried about that. They don't care. Until they melted all into one track of sparkling light. So again, that glittering and sparkling there. More of that beauty. So at this section here, we've got this kind of description of nature. And from that point onward, he starts talking about himself. So he's moving away from talking about nature now. But now, like one who rose proud of his skill to reach a chosen point with an unswerving line, I fixed my view upon the summit of a craggy rag. And he's proud. He's proud of his skill. So he thinks he's really good. He's really confident. What do we know from reading Ozymandias? What happens after confidence? Yeah. When we've got this confidence here, it kind of gives us this feeling that something's going to happen to take that confidence away from him. But now, like one who rose to reach a chosen point with an unswerving line. Okay? I fixed my view upon the summit of a craggy ridge. So he fixed his view upon the summit of a craggy ridge. So he's aiming for the edge of the lake where he thinks where it is. Okay, and that unswerving there as well. He's utterly sure. You know, if you swerve, it kind of shows that you're not quite sure what you're doing. He knows what he's doing. He is going directly where he's aiming for. He knows where he wants to be. The horizon's utmost boundary. He's going as far as he thinks he can go. Don't forget, all this way through, he's a small child, okay? So the utmost boundary, you know, it's the equivalent of Buzz Lightyear, to infinity and beyond. He's determined, he's getting there. Far above was nothing but the stars and the grey sky. So he's going back to this idea of nature here. And again, it's the beauty of the lake. Nothing but the stars and the grey sky. So back to this magical description again. Okay. She was an elfin pinnace. Now I'm going to try and highlight all three of those words separately, because some of this is obviously quite dreamlike and childlike, but don't forget Wordsworth is writing this as an adult talking about childhood. Okay, so elfin we know means fairy. Okay, pinnace is a type of boat, so it's a fairy boat. Lustily I dipped my oars into the silent lake. Now,
Do you have a stapler?
no. Sorry, interrupted there. Okay, so we've got the word elfin, which we know means fairy. Pinus we know means a type of boat, and lustily means enthusiastically. But we do hear something else going on there. Okay? Elves and fairies were often, in romantic poetry, linked to kind of whisking people away, often for romantic trysts. Yes, the word pinus does sound like something else, and lustily could also be linked to sexual feeling. Now, he's a child, but he's an adult talking about childish experience. And when we then get on to the next line, I dipped my oars into the silent lake, there is this kind of undertone here that we could look at and say, well, this is perhaps Wordsworth talking about how his experiences as a child have prepared him for experiences as an adult. I mean, that's something for you guys to look into at a different point. But yes, so we have this fairy boat, which expands on that magical description, and then dipped my oars into the silent lake. And as I rose upon the stroke, my boat went heaving through the water like a swan. So we've got this really interesting simile here. Heaving through the water like a swan. Okay? Again, we've got this more of this oxymoron here, because heaving really does suggest something quite heavy, and like a swan is quite elegant. So I don't know whether you've ever heard the analogy that a swan looks like it's beautiful, but underneath its feet are going at like 10,000 miles an hour in order to get it to move anywhere. So a swan looks beautiful and all calm and serene at the top, but underneath there's an awful lot more work going on. So as he's heaving the boat through the water, you can imagine the effort he's putting into making it move in this graceful manner. When, from that craggy steep till then, the horizon's bound, a huge peak black and huge, as if with voluntary power instinct upreared its head. So up until the swan, he's rowing out. So that's just him rowing. Okay? And then we've got this craggy steep. When from behind that craggy steep till then, the horizon's bound. A huge peak, black and huge. So the horizon's bound is literally just the edge of the horizon. So he's reminding us of what he was doing. So a little bit of repetition there. And then we have a huge peak, black and huge. And that's really quite scary for him. Okay, so that repetition of huge there. Really emphasises his fear. As if with voluntary power instinct. Okay, so the horizon has now changed. Okay, he can now see more. And it's like it's got a mind of its own. Upreared its head. Okay, and this is where we end up with this idea of a monster. Okay, if you can imagine, it's almost like a sea monster or the Loch Ness monster coming out of this lake, upreared. If a creature rears, it goes back on its hind legs. Okay, so it's coming out of it all of a sudden. Okay, so it's got a mind of its own. It's personified. Its head. And it makes it seem alien or monster-like. Monstrous, that's the word I'm looking for. Okay. I struck and struck again. Now, what does it sound like he's doing there? Jasper, what does it sound like he's doing?
Rowing pretty fast.
Right, he's rowing really fast, okay? His oars are striking the water. What could it also sound like he's doing?
He's hitting the monster.
Yeah, he's trying to hit it, Harry. Good. So we've got this idea here that these violent words here. It's like he's trying to take action against it. So at first he carries on moving towards it. It's almost like his rowing is actually an attack on the horizon. And growing still in stature, the grim shape towered up between me and the stars. So he's trying to attack it, but it's still growing. The grim shape. Now, the word grim here, there's a couple of things that we can look at with this. What does the word grim mean, first of all? Yeah? Not nice, frightening, good. But also, it links a little bit to legends. Does anybody know anything about a creature called the Grim? Yeah. The Grim, and most of you probably will have heard about this if you've read any of the Harry Potter books, The Prisoner of Azkaban. It's actually a legendary dog. It's supposed to be a black dog that hangs around graveyards. It's actually a really interesting backstory to it, I'll tell you later. But it's the idea of like this ghostly dog that's going to attack, okay? But the point is this is a creature from legend. Yes, J.K. Rowling steals an awful lot of her stuff from legends. Okay, so it's a legendary creature. Okay, it's frightening. It's kind of lurking in the background. Towered up between me and the stars. So don't forget, earlier on he was talking about these beautiful stars that he could see. And now they're being covered by it. So it's like the darkness is covering the beauty. So darkness is covering the magical light. And still, for so it seemed, with purpose of its own, and measured motion like a living thing strode after me. So we've got more of that personification, like a living thing strode after me. But it's actively chasing him now, as far as he is concerned. So we've got personification, we've got simile. That he gives up. He runs away. So this is a bit here, right up to strode after me. That is the description of the monster. But it's not really a monster, which is why I'm putting it in inverted commas. It's literally just the horizon. It's a cliff. And now he starts running away. With trembling oars I turned, and through the silent water stole my way back to the covert of the willow tree. Okay? So he is terrified. He's absolutely terrified. Okay? And it's his physical reaction to his fear. And through the silent water stole my way back to the covert. Silent water stole. So we've got some sibilants going on there. Probably representing that idea of the water noises. Because even though he's terrified, it's still silent. Okay? It's still silent and dark. It's at night. Back to the covert of the willow tree. There in her mooring place I left my bark. So he's back to referring to the boat as a woman again. I left my bark, my boat, and through the meadows homeward went in grave and serious mood. So he's gone from being this quite happy chappy where he's talking about, yay, I'm troubled pleasure. Look, I'm doing all of this exciting stuff. He's now no longer happy. He's miserable. He's scared. Okay? So he's running away. And then we pause on this particular event and we now move in time a few days later. But after I had seen that spectacle. So we've now jumped in time. And it's interesting that he uses a semicolon there. It's not like it's a completely different stanza. It's still part of the same experience. It's just the fact that that experience is now spanning out over a longer amount of time. But after I had seen that spectacle, for many days my brain worked with a dim and undetermined sense of unknown modes of being. Oh, my thoughts, there hung a darkness. Call it solitude. So he's trying to work out what's gone on. But he doesn't know what's happened. He doesn't understand why he got so scared. Oh, my thoughts, there hung a darkness. Call it solitude or blank desertion. He can't get it out of his head. No familiar shapes remained, no pleasant images of trees or sea or sky. Now, no colours of green fields. Now, it's interesting that he's now returning to this idea of nature being beautiful and he can't see it again. And it's here that we realise that this is Wordsworth realising that nature isn't all beauty and joy and fun and happiness. Nature isn't just nice things. You know, this experience is the equivalent of him watching a David Attenborough documentary on lions for the first time when he's about 6 or 7 and watching the lion eating a gazelle. And suddenly you realise that nature isn't all about cuddly, fluffy animals. It's actually about animals eating other animals. Okay? He's having that sort of experience. It's not just about all the nice stuff. It's about scary things as well. Nature is scary too. And he can't forget about it. But huge and mighty forms that do not live like living men moved slowly through the mind by day and were a trouble to my dreams. So huge and mighty forms. So these scary bits of nature that do not live like living men. So then his nightmares were a trouble to my dreams. And it's interesting with this indistinguished thing here. Okay, he's not afraid of the cliff. He's afraid of what the cliff could be. And one of the key things about the Romantics was they were a direct, they were going up against the idea of reason and rationality. And this is him saying there are more things in nature than I know about, which is why I'm scared of this. It's that unknown .
嗯 ， ， ， ， ， ， ， ， ， ， ， ， ， ， ， ， , ， , ， , ， , ， , ， , ， , ， , ， , ， , ， , , ， , , , , , , , , ， , , , , , ， ,
which makes it so scary for him. Okay, so the poem as a whole, where we end up with this final section of him being worried and having nightmares. It kind of travels through this kind of this story. So it starts with him doing this really exciting thing and being really happy and interested in the world around him, because he loves the natural world and he loves the daffodils and he loves being in Cumbria. I mean, Wordsworth himself fought to keep the lakes as a national treasure, right? Because they tried to build a railway through it and he refused to let them. And he loves it. And this is him understanding and recognizing that nature isn't just about all that happiness. So he's rowing out, he's really confident and he's excited, you know, he's troubled pleasure. He's like, yes, here we go. And then he sees this scary thing and he doesn't know how to process it because he's a small child. And then he ends up being worried and scared. And obviously this is Wordsworth as an adult talking about his childhood experiences. So we have to question how this power of nature affects him. And this poem is in the Power and Conflict booklet, the anthology, because it's about how the power of nature is far, far more powerful than human beings. And it makes a brilliant comparison for something like Ozymandias or London, or some of the war poems, for example, like Exposure, where we're talking about people being frozen by nature, and the fact that there's a war going on isn't actually what's killing them, it's the natural world. And this makes a brilliant one to compare with things like Storm on the Island as well. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry for the interruption in the middle. This is what happens when we record live. And there you go, Year 10. There's Prelude and all the notes you need.